Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Karen Squatter Steals My Property While I'm Gone, Calls Cops on Me When I Return. Hello all, I'm Gabriel Miller and this is how I lost my home and my friend on the same day. I'll preface by explaining I got a promotion last winter that lifted me to the position of CTO with a heap of new responsibilities and perks. One of which was long business trips to Papua New Guinea where we mined for the metals that we used in the manufacture of our gadgets. This time the trip would be 2 months. Now, that wouldn't usually be a problem except I had a young Labrador called Reg that needed supervision, and my close family members were unable to take him at this time so I had to find other arrangements. This is where Emma comes into the story. Emma is a friend I've known since the college days so I felt it safe to ask her to undertake the task. All she had to do was live in my house for the duration to look after the place and Reg while I'm away, easy right? After what felt like a lifetime of sitting in dull office meetings through a haze of uncomfortable humidity, I was very excited to be coming home. I texted ahead to Emma a few times about my progress and she had occasionally texted back before to let me know how things were to keep me at ease, but this time she was worryingly silent, which only increased my anxiousness to let this trip finally be over. I pulled into the driveway and raced up the path, slamming on the door 3 times to a long pause. Emma eventually opened the door looking very astonished on my return, as if the many messages had somehow got lost in the unseen ether. "Gabe. Hi. I wasn't expecting you back so soon," she said in somewhat exaggerated shock as she reached out for a hug. To my confusion, this conversation carried on from the porch as she stood partially shielded by the front door in expectance or preparation to suddenly close it on a dime. "You got your stuff all packed up?" I asked expectantly. The door closed with a heavy slam and a voice bellowed from inside as she moves deeper inside the building, "Yeah. Just a minute." After a few minutes, I repeated my knocking and well left unanswered, puzzled. I moved around the house peering through closed curtains as I made my way to try the back door. As I grasp the cold metal handle I hear the distinct click of the lock from the inside. I bang on the glass in annoyance, nearly cracking it. "This isn't funny now, open the door." Muffled voices carry inside but it sounded like a telephone call. I circled the house quietly considering my options as 2 cop cars swerved around the street corner and came to an abrupt stop at the end of my street. The squad of officers stepped out and approached the house, eyeing me with their hands lowered to their holster. The front door swung open on their arrival and Emma pointed out to me accusingly, "That's him, officers. That's the intruder." I did my best to stay cool despite a boiling temper and immense confusion as I explained the situation to them. One officer stayed to talk while the others approached Emma to get her side of the story through dramatics and waterworks galore. When my officer asked for proof I pat my jacket pocket and found it empty, realizing too late that I had lost my house keys shortly before the flight home. Unconvinced by my story and lack of physical proof, the officers escorted me away amidst my own protests. When threatened with criminal charges I got back into my car and drove to the nearest motel. I may not have my keys but damned if I was going to let that traitorous snake stay in there. Through the next few days, I shifted my time between the motel, my house, and the police station, all of which were unhelpful to my plight. Sleep eluded me as I continued the fight to regain my life while Emma stood victorious and proud from winning the local cops to her side. I watched helplessly as she threw wild parties, her friends coming and going as they pleased, and left the house trashed and defiled from their presence. It took all I had to contain my temper or risk jail time. When it looked like I had hit rock bottom with no hope in sight, a miracle came in the form of a rather mysterious package from overseas. The shrill cries of the motel room phone woke me at noon to call me down to the police station. I assumed it would be a line of questioning or legal proceedings to which I was already doubtful. Nevertheless, I dragged myself out of bed with a pessimistic attitude. During my regular visits the officers got quite familiar with my interruptions of their daily processes. What started as warm and caring attitudes degraded into looks of disappointment and frustration. My case had become quite well known around town, though none of my neighbors had ever come forward to help press my claim, seemingly content to let this farce continue so as to provide those longer periods of gossip and immoral entertainment. This time I was sat by a cluttered desk in the main office and asked to wait as an attendant fetched the box from storage. A few uncomfortable minutes later they returned to explain that the box was sent by a local police force from Papua New Guinea that found my wallet and keys after arresting someone for armed robbery, contacting the station here before forwarding it via airmail. Thrilled at fate's second chance, I eagerly confirmed my identity and took back my belongings, showing the officers there the definitive proof that I owned the house. It was on my driver's license and my old knackered set of keys. I was escorted that afternoon back to my house after the receptionist confirmed that Emma was still there. She probably thought it was a small update in her favor, but I waited eagerly to win that smug smirk right off her face. Her facade dropped as soon as she saw me exit the cop car and walk with them up to the porch. I stood in silent satisfaction as the lead officer issued the intruder with an order to vacate the property after they saw my proof. She initially protested, but when she saw this was making her argument worse, she faded into simply nodding. I rang a moving van to come and pick up her belongings and paid extra for their short notice. I didn't mind as long as it got her out of there quicker. At this time most of the cops left with one car stationed outside in case negotiations fell through. Emma sulked through the corridors as she went from room to room dazed. I left her to it as I surveyed the damages, moving through room after room to note the devastation they had caused. I sigh in contempt and shake my head. A click sounds behind me as cold metal is pressed to the back of my head. I turn slowly to find Emma holding me at gunpoint, with my own gun. After managing to knock it away from her, we wrestled as hands grabbed at the metal weapon, only interrupted a minute later by the stationed officer who barely stopped her in time before I was shot. Emma was driven down to the station and jail time was added to her list of charges. We don't stay in contact. The next story is titled, Downstairs Neighbor Demands We Walk Normal. So, we do. And she hates it. We've been living in this apartment for 3 years. It's old. It's cozy. The building is around 20 years old, and though the appliances and wall paint and carpets have been replaced, the floor has not. It's painfully thin. Every step we take creaks and groans, and it's annoying. Living on the 3rd floor, we know it's gotta be even more so for whoever lives below us. So, we've done our best to be mindful of their comfort, and try not to make too much noise. We had a new downstairs neighbor move in a couple months ago. And she is not convinced that we are literally tiptoeing around our apartment. Every time I get home and close my door, she's banging on my floor with a broom or something. Every time I cross the living room, banging. Every time I vacuum, banging. Every time my dog chews on a bone, she bangs on the dang floor, and it scares my poor dog. We've been living on eggshells trying to be courteous, but she's driving us mad with her insistent banging every time we take a step. I guess she had finally had enough, because she came upstairs to yell at us the other day. You are too loud. You need to be courteous and walk normal. You have neighbors, she yells. She almost looked like she was going to cry. It was disturbing. We felt bad. My husband tried to explain that, "Ma'am, we do our best to be quiet, but these floors are really old and they creak. We're not stomping or jumping or running. We're living, but we'll continue to be considerate." She was not impressed with his answer and continued to argue. "Well, I lived on a 1st floor before and my other neighbors weren't loud like you. It's so loud and my job is so stressful, so I want you to stop stomping. I don't want to be a mean person, but I really think you're too loud. So, you know what we agreed to? To walk like normal people." Okay, we'll walk normally. We said, this is exactly what we had been doing. Nothing different. So, she still bangs on the floor and gives us nasty looks. But we are being normal people who walk normal and don't stomp around. Our dog is a normal dog who chews on bones and walks from his bed to his food bowl and gets excited when it's time for walkies. We are so normal. We'll be moving in the next month, so it's no skin off my back. Hope the next tenant doesn't have kids, or maybe I do. And then she'll finally understand that we are normal people who walk normal. Maybe she'll miss us. Edit. So I've noticed a lot of y'all upset over me calling a 20-something-year-old building old. Sorry. I should have called it dated. I'm in a big city where most apartment buildings around here are pretty new and have maybe only been around a decade or so. So, this one is old to me. Not new. Also, thank y'all for the stories, input, and advice on how to be better neighbors. Some are pretty insightful. However, considering she banged on the floor again today while I was running the bath, I'm not too concerned with wearing slippers all day around the house, or patting the carpeted floors with noise-canceling material. Angry people like being angry. I'm excited for the move-out day, when people will be constantly walking around and moving heavy furniture. The next story is titled, Neighbors Think My Life Now Revolves Around Them. So, on today's episode of WTF from the neighbors. I need to have them approve when I do things that make any sort of noise. My neighbor just rang my doorbell to tell me his wife said to stop hammering. I was dumbfounded. I just kinda stared and said, "Excuse me?" And he informed me that we would be unable to make any sort of noise for the next few months because of their baby. To which I laughed in his face and closed the door. And now his wife is screaming at my door and he is messaging me to please just so what his wife says. So, some background. My spouse bought this house in 2011. Both houses are single-family detached homes. Both lots are 1.5 lots, so there is 33 feet roughly between our houses compared to the 6 feet for the rear of the street. Neighbor husband was already in his house. I moved in 8 years ago. Shortly after, saw the neighbor for the first time and it was someone I've known since I was 4. Went to school all the way through high school together. We are 40. 3 years ago he met someone. She had at the time a 2-year-old girl. She would stay at his house and I would constantly find the kid wandering the streets. They would just send her outside with no supervision, no toys, no fenced yard and expect her to entertain herself. The child was and still is nothing but a brat. 2 years ago she moved in with her daughter. I run a daycare so my yard is full of fun toys. But we also have 3 other fenced off areas. One for our pool in the summer, one for our dogs, and one for our hot tub. All have separate fences and self-closing gates, plus my external fence is 6 feet. During 2020 when COVID hit bad, the kids were doing virtual schooling from home. She never actually did it. She would be ringing my doorbell in the middle of the day asking me to open my yard for her. I would explain that she can't be here when I have daycare kids and my daughter will come out to play after supper. She went to their backyard, dragged patio furniture to my fence and climbed in. Who knows how long she was actually in there. But she decided she was done and then couldn't get out. The latch for my main gate is at the very top so the babies can't open it when my back is turned. She started screaming. I ran out in a panic. Took her home, explained what happened to mom and mom gave me shit for just not allowing her to play. I face $100,000 fine if she is caught on my property during daycare hours. I explained this, she still snapped and called me a witch. I left it at that. Happened a handful more times. I started sending them daycare invoices. Still kept happening. I finally told them I would have to call the police next time. Which I did. Except this time, mom and grandpa were both sitting outside on the stairs and watched her do. Also never bothered to come help her open the gate when she started screaming. Police gave them shit and told them to stop or mom would be charged with child endangering. I now have proximity sensors at the top of my fence and get a notification if anything goes over my fence. It's gotten better as she has gotten older. So last summer, we set up our above-ground pool. Just ordered a new pump system and heater. Pool was half filled. I had also just done up all my planters. I casually glance at my security cameras and see her by the pool. I head out. Main gate was open as the neighborhood kids were running from yard to yard playing. She took it upon herself to go to the pool and take buckets of soil from my planters and dump it into the pool. $400 damage to my brand new $1,000 pump heater system that was up less than 4 hours. I snapped and screamed at her to get out of my yard and not come back. She is not allowed in my yard at all unless me or my spouse is out there. Now to current time. They had a new baby last week. And me hammering in my basement is disturbing them in their house 33 feet away. And they expect me to wait until the fall to finish my project. So, I'm currently sitting on my bench outside enjoying a glass of water with my outdoor speakers playing metal while I mow the lawn. Which is much more louder than the little bit of hammering. I'll finish that tonight after dark. Edit. Lots of people are saying to call police and CPS. I do call police when I feel it's necessary. We have a major drug gang issue and they are busy with that and overdoses. If I call, because it's non-violent and they recognize the address, it's at least 24 hours or usually not at all. I've spoken with child protection agents, and this does not fall under their umbrella. It's not neglect. The kid doesn't listen. End of story. It's not like the parents are telling her to do it. As for those concerned about her wandering the neighborhood, I'm in a smaller city. My kid has been playing by herself in the neighborhood with regular check-ins since she was 4. I have no issues with that. At 2 and 3 when she originally did it was ridiculous. As for saying not to let my daughter play with her, I cannot take away my daughter's entire friend group, which is exactly what would happen. We are one of 3 houses in a row with kids. House 1 has 3 kids, House 2, Problem House, has 2 kids, House 3, me, has 1 kid. House 1 and 2 all go to the same school. They are already outside playing by the time my daughter gets home. My daughter does activities Saturday, Sunday mornings, so same thing. So not allowing my daughter to play with 1 kid, also takes 4 others away. The last story is titled, HOA Lady Want Me to Get Rid of Fly Screens. To be clear, I am Dutch and live in the Netherlands. When an apartment building is built, Dutch law is such that there must be an HOA, Vereniging van Eigenaren equals VVE. So, when you buy an apartment from the builder, you have to sign an agreement for the HOA. Now the new owners can decide to choose the board members of the new formed HOA or opt for an external company arranging everything. Which is of course more expensive than doing everything by the owners' board members themselves. You have to pay monthly for the maintenance of the building. So, when I bought my apartment a few years ago, the VVE was already 20 years in existence. They, the VVE, had upheld the building in good order and had a healthy cash flow. For instance, every 10 years the outside of the building is painted. The color is solidified in the VVE manual. You cannot change the color to one of your liking. This is to keep the building in a unified form and color. Now my windows facing the gallery have fly screens, which came to the house. By Dutch law you only buy the space within the apartment and not the walls etc. That belongs to the VVE. Therefore, you cannot change anything on the outside of your apartment. Like I said, the color. One day I was walking towards my front door and I encountered a lady who was on the board and told me to remove the fly screens before my window. The reason was that they were ugly and were bringing the value of the building down. Unfortunately for her, my neighbor had exactly the fly screens. So, I pointed out that 1. I bought the house exactly like that. So, if it was forbidden to have them, why did the VVE made objections to the previous owner and neighbors who had the same screens? 2. I would remove them as soon as the other neighbors would start taking their screens from their windows because of new regulations the VVE would accept. The VVE would have to arrange a meeting with all the homeowners, and any change in regulations need a 51% majority of votes. Also, she complained about my net curtains lay on the windowsill. They were an eyesore. It was degrading the value of the building. Now that was something I didn't mind changing. By the way, that lady lived beside me. Maybe she was trying to look into my home, which used to be normal in the old days. And now the kicker. I found out that she was actually selling her house and was concerned about the value of her property. Sneaky witch. Thank you for listening.